All Things Montessori community. Happy Tuesday. I'm so excited about this week's episode. So I first want to chat about what this week's episode is about, but also talk about a brand new section or series of All Things Montessori that I'm going to be introducing. So I had this idea a few months ago, and it just came to me from thinking of Montessori, thinking about everything that's going on right now, and thinking about who we could really hear from. And so what I decided and what kind of came to me was we should go right to the source, teachers, guides in the classroom right now. And so I thought about it and asked a few of my good teacher friends if they'd be willing to come on the podcast. And of course, they agreed. And so today I'm launching something called the Teacher Series. This is going to be a series of interviews of teachers all over the country and hopefully the world. And they're talking about their experience through training, their experience in Montessori, and their experience in this time right now of COVID. So I'm delighted and I'm so excited. Today, we have on the podcast Sarah McCabe. Sarah is an upper elementary teacher. We trained together at WMI and became great friends. And Sarah is pure sunshine. She is so fantastic and has so much wise and helpful advice. And I really hope you guys enjoy this interview just as much as we enjoyed talking and catching up with each other. This episode is brought to you by Patreon. Thank you to all of our existing patrons. We could not do this without you. If you are already a patron member, you know how fun it is to be a patron of All Things Montessori. If you'd like to become a patron of All Things Montessori and help us run this show, you can head on over to Patreon, find us under All Things Montessori, and of course, it is linked below. And finally, this episode is brought to you by Sapling Supply. Sapling Supply is a beautiful, wonderful, family-owned Montessori furniture company, and it's run by two wonderful Montessori dads. This company is honest, authentic, and makes beautiful pieces of furniture. So go ahead and check them out. The website is linked below, and you can get 10% off anything in the store site-wide if you use our promo code ATM10. I'm so excited today to talk with my friend Sarah, who I was fortunate enough to train with at WMI. And I'm doing this teacher series with All Things Montessori because I think hearing from teachers who are in the thick of it right now, especially with COVID, is extremely valuable. If not just to have somebody say something and then you're like, oh, okay, I'm not the only one. So welcome, Sarah. I'm so happy to talk with you today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Happy to share my experience as a Montessori teacher because each one is so vastly different.
Oh my gosh, isn't it? That's so true. So whenever we have guests on the podcast, we always ask what their Montessori story is because just as everyone's teaching experience is different, I found that everybody's Montessori experience and how they got there is uniquely different. So what is your Montessori story?
All right. Well, so my path has changed many times since starting college. But so I went to UConn originally for psychology. And, at that age, you think you know what direction you want to go in with it, and you're not and then your mind totally changes later on. So after I graduated, I was thinking that I would want to continue with psychology. Started at Central with my master's and then realized that wasn't the direction I wanted to go in. And I actually really wanted to work with children in a school setting. Mm-hmm. So then I was thinking perhaps that psychology degree would be made of better use as a social worker, which then led me to apply to UConn's Master of Social Work program, which is once a year application. So even after you apply, you have to wait a year before you were to start if you did get accepted. Mm. So in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. So for a year, I have to find work until I'm ready to start school again. And obviously, at that point in my life, I wanted it to be a job that was related to whichever field I planned on entering after getting my master's degree. So it was difficult. It was difficult to try to find a job that wasn't, the career, because I wasn't planning on making it a career at that point.
Right.
So just a job I would have for a year, but something still meaningful. And as I was looking at all these jobs related to working with children, I came upon this position. I was doing an online search, and it was for a Montessori school in West Hartford. And I grew up in Newington, the town right next to West Hartford. So, I found it a little strange. I was like, oh, I've never heard of this school, even though I live right next to this town. But it sounded like a really interesting position. It was as a teaching assistant in a lower elementary classroom with children ages 6 to 9. So right after that, I'm like, well, that's interesting that the class is 6 to 9-year-olds, right? Because in my growing up, I went through the traditional school.
Yeah.
So that just, that was new to me. So I was intrigued, and I did a little more research into the specific school that was hiring for the position. And then I just got totally sucked into their website. So I was on the Montessori School of Greater Hartford's website reading about, the Montessori philosophy and what it meant. And I remember like exactly where I was sitting in my home at the time. I was on the floor at the coffee table. And I remember reading the website and being like, this is how every single school should be set up for children.
Yeah.
And I can't believe I've never heard of this until now. And it wasn't like it was a new school. It had been around for a long time. And it wasn't a new philosophy. That had clearly been around for a long time.
Yeah.
It was just something I had never heard about in my studies. And, psychology and education are very much one and the same. You can't really separate them.
Right.
So I'm surprised it never came up in any courses of mine. But long story short, I ended up applying for the position. Was super, super, super nervous. I remember the interview was like on the hottest day of the summer humanly possible, and my car had no air conditioning at the time. And I was like, oh my gosh, these people are going to be so repulsed by me. But I came prepared, and I came with what experience I did have with children and showed them everything that I was willing to learn and how excited I was. And I ended up getting the job and worked as the lower elementary assistant for 3 years. And it was after the first half of the first year that I went to the teacher I worked for, my long-term mentor, Liz. I went to her. I was like having a bit of a dilemma going on inside of me, because I'm very much a person who, like, once I make a plan, it's very hard for me to break from it.
Yeah.
And I made this plan and applied to UConn for their social work program, and now I find myself toying with the idea of making a career for myself at the school because of how much I've fallen in love with it and the philosophy and the community. But part of me is nervous that to give up,
right.
The path towards the master's of social work. And, it was over winter break that I did find out I got accepted into that program. So I came to this crossroads. And I just remember her saying to me, like, I'm surprised you didn't get bit by the Montessori bug sooner.
Huh.
I was like, well, I did pretty early on. It just takes me a while to kind of grapple with things and decide for myself what it is I truly want. So I talked with her a bit. I talked with the head of school, told her about the interests that I had, and basically was told, you have a home here. If you want to make a career for yourself, we are happy to support you in creating that career. Obviously, we'll support you with whatever decision you make because that's up to you. But we would like to send you to training to become a Montessori teacher. That will likely happen after a couple more years of being an assistant. So for me, I was like, okay, I have a timeline. I have another plan. And that's the one I'm going to go with. I'm going to take a leap of faith and tell UConn thank you. But I've found, another path that I would like to explore.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, then it led me to WMI at Loyola in Maryland. 6 hours from Connecticut, but totally worth the adventure and the memories that we made with everyone that we went through the training with.
Yeah.
And then that was a very challenging yet rewarding time of our lives. And I came out a completely changed person with a whole new perspective on life and the developing child, and how much you truly need to be devoted to Montessori to be able to give yourself to this job completely.
Yeah.
And then when I finished the program, I got on the phone with my head of school to see, when I returned that following academic year, which elementary classroom I would be in, because I wasn't sure how the roles may have changed while I was gone for an entire year. And she said that the lower elementary position was taken, but she would love to have me as the upper elementary teacher. Again, this was not the original plan.
Right. So your plan's changing again. So it's like,
I'm like, oh gosh, okay, here we go. Something like I have no idea what's going to happen or what the experience is going to be like, because I have not worked with the 9 to 12-year-olds yet. But, despite being nervous, I felt very much supported and encouraged by her. And she said, if anyone could do it, you could do it. I said, okay, sure. Let's try it and see if, I can prove that to be true. And then just kind of was thrusted into the upper elementary environment and made the most out of it during the 5 years that I've been there now.
I remember you telling me that you got the upper elementary position, because we were all like searching for jobs and extremely stressed out. And I remember you telling me that, and I could see in your eyes that you were so excited and so terrified, like at the same time, because you were delighted and you were like, I got this, but you were like, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah, and it's, when you do the student teaching, you get a taste.
You get a taste.
Right? You get a taste of each level.
Totally.
I think the part that made me nervous was obviously, like, with upper elementary, you have older children that are developing their personalities more and finding their voices and putting their foot down with certain things a little bit more than 6 to 9-year-olds would.
Yeah.
But also the curriculum, right? You're nervous. How do I make the curriculum challenging enough for an upper elementary student who maybe is like even excelling beyond their age of development?
Sure.
And as with anything, that's something you learn how to do as you're in the experience. The same would be true for lower elementary, right? It's just the unknown that usually scares us.
No, for sure. And I do think it's a really crucial thing to mention, that the curriculum and the beautiful lessons that we have from Maria Montessori and Mario Montessori, I think you can do a lot of it before they hit 9. So then you get to upper L and you're like, okay, the math goes further. So, okay, we got like decimals, we got cube root. There's more.
Oh yeah, the math is endless.
The math is endless, of course. But then I bet there's just sort of moments where you're like, okay, you need to give them more, or like, okay, well, they need to go further. Like, how was that experience? What'd you do?
It was the first year, I will be brutally honest, was I thought the training was hard. And I know Jamie tried to tell us this and prepare us for this.
Right.
I just didn't realize to what degree. The first year of teaching was exponentially harder.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to juggle so many things.
Sure.
Right. You're trying to lesson plan, get to know the children, establish yourself as a teacher, figure out, at the upper elementary level, how can I expand on each of these lessons and make it more enticing and more challenging for this age group and each individual child, because each child is different. And you just realize that type of planning for the small groups, for each individual child, for lessons that you need to expand on and relearn yourself because you just have lost touch with all of these topics since you were, younger and you were in grade school.
Mm-hmm.
You realize it takes a lot of time
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of effort to kind of reteach yourself the details, and make new stories for the children
Mm-hmm.
for the history sections or the geography topics. And you have to learn it all yourself
Yeah.
and get to know it to a point where you feel comfortable saying, all right, now I can sit with this group and like comfortably teach them about this and guide them as to how they can explore it more deeply in other ways
Sure.
or what directions they might be able to take it in. And so what ended up happening that first year especially is I would spend a good chunk of my weekends just reading up on topics, studying them,
Mm-hmm.
trying to think creatively about different follow-up work we could do for it. And it does get stressful, right? It does get stressful at times. You kind of get in your own head a little bit and think, oh my gosh, as a teacher, like I should know this,
Sure.
right? I should already know this.
Right.
I should just have all this information in my memory bank ready to spill out to the kids. And you constantly have to check your thinking and remind yourself that with Montessori, you're not just telling them everything you know,
Exactly.
like a traditional school system. You're not just feeding them or vomiting them information
Right.
and information to the point where, now you've lost them. You're trying to get them excited about the topic and give them the key facts that will entice them to want to learn more and explore more on their own
Mm-hmm.
outside of the lesson. So a lot of self-reflection is involved in being a teacher, I think, especially in Montessori.
Yeah.
Because you have to remind yourself of that and you have to be forgiving of yourself while still, relearning and finding your love of learning of all these topics again, but also not putting too much on your pressure to know everything.
I think,
right? You're kind of a jack of all trades,
sure.
but you know a little bit about all those different trades. You don't know
Right.
a ton.
Yeah, it's like all the quick facts, but you have to do a little bit more digging. And I think when you're in lower elementary, which is the bulk of my experience, I worked with some upper elementary children in the fall, just virtually, and I realized there's just benefits and hardships with both sections, because with lower elementary, they'll believe anything you tell them, and you don't have to worry about knowing everything or being right on everything, because they'll forgive you and forget 5 minutes later. But
Right.
they need a lot more support with follow-up work. In the reverse, with upper elementary, they see right through you. You got to be on your stuff. But their follow-up work is boundless
awesome.
and amazing. You can go so much further, and they can eventually be more independent than.
And when they get excited, like they come up with ideas that are even better than yours.
Sure.
Right? And you're like, oh man, like that's so creative. I would not have thought to follow it up that way. But yeah, sure, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
Go do it. Go tackle it. And then they're totally bought in, and you don't hear from them for like hours.
I know.
Because they're just totally lost in this work, right? That's harder for 6 to 9 year olds.
Yes.
To manage.
Yes.
Without the teacher supporting them more.
Yeah, it's definitely it's just some pros and cons of each level. Isn't it? I always found it really funny when a child would come to me asking permission to do like the most amazing follow-up work I'd ever heard of. And I'm just like, what are you thinking I'm going to say? Like, no, I don't want you to just go be creative and like truly blow my mind. It's amazing.
And they're so polite about it
like,
too.
You're like, thinking about doing this, and it's just like, what?
Yeah, and then when they see how excited you are, they're like, oh, okay, these are the ideas I should come up with more often.
But what a beautiful lesson to instill in children, that their own ideas are so valuable and amazing. And not, because I'm a product of public school as well. And I turned out fine, had beautiful, amazing teachers, of course, but it's a really different experience. And it's just the way the system is constructed. It's not the teacher's fault. It's just sort of the way it works. And, I think there's a lot of those ideas that children might have early on that they never really get to explore because they're just not able to,
Right. And even as an adult, right? Like, we fall victim to this time and time again as adults. It's like when we have these kind of outlandish dreams or ideas and we divulge them to people are so quick to say, "Oh, that's crazy. Like, don't waste your time doing that. Don't even go down that road."
Right.
And I just think it's beautiful that for the children, we're telling them the complete opposite.
I know.
We're saying, go down that road, try it. The worst thing that happens, all right, maybe it doesn't work out the way you expected it to, but at least you did it.
Right.
Right. And at least you had fun with it and you worked with your friends and you made these relationships and, you guys learned all this new information along the way, because it's not about the product as much as it is about exploring yourself and exploring what you're capable of.
Totally.
So, try it out. Try that idea out. As crazy as people might say it sounds, you have to try it.
Yeah. And I always go back to the fact that the Montessori classroom is one where mistakes are absolutely fine. And that's such a hard lesson. It's a really hard lesson as an adult because I don't do well with failure. But being in the Montessori classroom or being around children working in Montessori schools, it really shows you, it has that mentality like, yeah, we all make mistakes. And just like what you were saying, Sarah, we're not supposed to know everything. And that's such a great lesson. I think so many adults, people, whatever, we all want to just have all the answers because it's really scary to say, you know what, I don't know. Or I don't know what that word means. You know what I mean? Just simple things like that, where you would just be agreeing just to not seem stupid.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think our world now just has created such a culture of perfectionism that in upper elementary, what I see a lot of is kids that come in terrified to try new work choices or take on these more challenging lessons sometimes because they're so anxious about messing up or not doing it right or not coming off as really smart or knowing it all already. And after a while, being in the classroom, they start to see that there's moments where I admit, I say, oh, I don't know the answer to that. That's something that you'll definitely have to look up and tell me or teach me because I don't know that information. And there's a ton of stuff that I don't know.
Right.
And I will actively tell the upper elementary students because they're at this age where you can be very honest with them. Like, this is a topic that I don't feel I know enough about yet to give you a lesson on just now, but give me a couple of days, give me some time to read up on it, so that I can prepare something, juicy for you. And it shows them that, like, hey, it's okay not to know something. It doesn't mean you're any less intelligent or more intelligent if you do or do not know it. It just means you have some more work to do to learn it.
Yeah.
And that's an ongoing process, right? And you're doing that at age 10, 12, you're also doing it at age 32. And you'll still be doing it at age 64. And, it's an unending process. So then they start to see, oh, okay, this is something normal that I can be comfortable with. And then they stop putting so much pressure on themselves and on each other.
Yeah. It's just a beautiful thing, right? Like that life learning, craving more information and knowing that they can get it, Yeah. I mean, if you have the tools and you know how to research, possibilities are endless. So moving right along, I wanted to just check in on how COVID has been. I know you're back in the classroom. Math.
Yes. Yep.
Woof.
What a year, huh?
Yeah, right?
Listen, I will take wearing a mask all day over the distance learning.
I bet.
Because it gives the children what they were missing during distance learning. It gives the adults what we were missing during distance learning, and that's the community piece of it.
Of course.
Feeling, the energy that comes with collaborating and sharing ideas in person and having that energy in person to kind of feed off of everyone else while you're working. It creates this atmosphere, this environment that makes it easy to want to work and to want to learn in.
Yes.
I think with the distance learning, when people were isolated, you lose that.
Yeah.
You can try as hard as you want with virtual meetings and virtual lessons, and Google Classroom was a great tool, and I'm really happy that I had the opportunity to learn how to use it, because we still use it for different things in the classroom. But that I would be lying if I said I would ever want to return to that time period.
Oh my gosh, totally.
It was just not effective for the kids
Yeah.
in terms of learning. I didn't feel fulfilled as a teacher. I really missed that connection with the kids in person. And I know they missed it with each other, because it's just not the same over a computer.
Yeah.
So we were all thrilled to be back in person. And as with anything, you adapt to the time. So
Sure.
so wearing a mask is super uncomfortable and hot and gets tiring.
Right.
But as a community, you figure out ways to curb those negative aspects of it, and you weave mask breaks into the day, and you spend as much time outside as possible so that you're not having to wear the mask so much.
Sure.
And all of those little things help to make it more manageable. And after a while, you just get so used to it, it just becomes part of your new normal.
Right.
Right. And I've had these discussions with the upper elementary students, and they've done writing prompts about it, about their feelings and their thoughts around the distance learning versus being back in person, and what their thoughts are about the past year. And the consensus is that distance learning was awful. They all hated it. And I told them I totally get it.
Oh my God.
And even as much as sometimes the masks can be cumbersome and annoying, they're just happy to be back around each other in the presence of their friends, in the presence of teachers that they've missed. And it actually, they came back with a kind of newfound appreciation for each other, and a new respect for even people that they didn't consider friends, but people whose presence they just missed being around, for the simple fact that they're in a class together. And it created a very kind, tight-knit community, more so than in previous years.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. How are you enforcing social distancing at school? Like, how are the kids doing with that? I bet that's hard.
I'm going to put enforcing in air quotes.
Sure.
I'm going to be super real about this.
Please.
Okay?
Please.
Because, with upper elementary, much easier, obviously, to accomplish social distancing.
Yes.
Because they really understand the logic behind it, and they understand the science behind everything and why we're doing it. Still makes it incredibly hard for them to naturally stay away from each other.
Yes.
So I put X's that were 6 feet apart on the classroom floors. I put desks 6 feet apart, and for 2-person tables, we put barriers up in the middle that were clear so they could still see each other. And you put all these things into practice, and you go over the rules at the very beginning of the year about the distancing, and this is how far apart you should be at all times. So you really can't share material very well.
Right.
And if you do use material, you have to wipe it down. So they each got their own cleaning kit.
Great.
They each had their own pencil pouches with, different scissors, colored pencils, the basic, school necessities. And they had set assigned seats for a period of time, and then we would rotate and switch where they sat. They would wipe down everything, disinfect everything, switch seats for another period of time, so that they weren't truly assigned. for the whole year. But obviously they had to keep coming back to a seat where, they weren't sharing the surface with somebody else.
Of course.
And that was pretty good in the beginning. And then we're all very social creatures by nature.
Yeah, it's impossible to be perfect at this. Are you serious? Like,
it is utterly impossible to keep them 6 feet apart at all times.
Of course.
So, as a teacher, you just try to stay on top of it and give them gentle reminders when they're getting too close.
Sure.
And as a teacher, I will even admit, when I saw them working together on material and they were doing beautifully and enjoying it and just coming to all these, different realizations with each other and working through the process, and they weren't 6 feet apart, I'd be like, all right. As long as it's almost 6 feet apart,
right,
I can work with that.
Right.
All right, because it's just,
it's
if
like
you take that piece out, they're going to be miserable.
Right.
And I couldn't.
It is like everybody's just doing their best, and these situations and these circumstances that we're in right now are unthinkable, and they're not human nature. It's not human nature for us to be so apart. It's not human nature for upper elementary kids not to all be climbing on top of each other and working in a group of like 7 or whatever, Yeah. So I think in my eyes, what you're telling me is super honest, but it sounds like it's going as best as it can be right now. Yeah. And I think that's awesome.
And it's kind of one of those things where I feel like you have to pick your battles. Right? Totally. So obviously in the, when the weather's nice, it's much easier because you can be outside and you can have the mask off, and then the kids, are definitely capable of being 6 feet apart more than they were before, because there's just more space to do that with. And there's not as much background noise, so they don't feel like they have to get closer together.
Right.
That comes with its own challenges, because then your time gets eaten up having to transport materials in and out, clean them. So time is, what's the word I'm looking for? More precious, because you have less of it after, you transition from inside to outside, and that takes a while with any group of children, obviously. But the winter was much more difficult, which is why, when they would work on materials and maybe weren't exactly 6 feet apart, as long as they were trying and wearing their mask properly and washing their hands regularly for the full 20 seconds. And we had gone over that ad nauseum, right?
Sure.
That's,
of course.
I think we have like 4 different sinks that we're using between all the kids, so that, it doesn't eat up time, but they're doing what they need to be doing to stay sanitary. And then once the weather got nicer, it got easier again. And it's just a constant balance. Just choosing the right moment to really remind them, like, hey, you really should be further apart, because you don't want to, we've made it this far in the year in person, and we don't want to mess that up, because we all remember how unhappy we were with distance learning. And so far we've been good, and they've been diligent in their hand washing and, wearing their masks. And even at snack and lunchtime, if we can't eat outside, they're at their desks and their masks are off, so they know they're not allowed to talk.
Wow.
And, that's difficult, but somehow these 9 to 12-year-olds have gotten used to it and managed it.
Yeah. Children are amazing. They're so, I think they adapt so much easier than we do in our 30s or adults in general. They are so resilient and amazing. And I love what you say about picking your battles. I think that is such a constant theme of teaching in general, especially with grace and courtesy things, because if you harp on a child constantly about something they just can't seem to remember, or it just becomes a super negative experience. And in your heart that they're not doing it on purpose.
For both parties too.
What'd you say?
For both parties, for the students and for you.
Oh my God, absolutely. It's not fun to just be nagging, even though things happen. But, the children want to be in the class. They want to do well. They want to obviously social distance, be super clean, but we're all human.
Yeah. And it's funny that, because I was thinking nagging is like, it's exactly the word that came to mind.
Yes.
Because in the beginning of the year, I felt like that's all I was doing. Was I was so focused on making sure they were all 6 feet apart constantly, and their masks were on properly constantly, and they were wiping down material as soon as they used it, and I felt like that was my job. Right now, I'm not teaching lessons. Now
you're like the clean,
just observing them to make sure they're following all the protocols perfectly.
Sure.
And I felt like, I'm just nagging. All I'm doing is spending my day nagging. Yeah. And they're getting tired of it because they're hearing me say the same thing over and over again. And I'm not having fun with lessons the way that I did before. And I quickly realized, like, I need to find a better balance. I need to fix something here, because I can't spend the whole year doing this, or that's going to put a strain on my relationship with the kids. Their relationships with each other, because then they'd feel like they need to nag one another.
Right. Oh, I bet.
And it just wouldn't be the same.
I bet there's some room.
Oh yeah.
From the children too.
And it's like, okay, they get enough from me. Not everyone needs to be doing that. To worry.
I could just picture.
But obviously, the kids model the kids follow what you're modeling. So
of course,
I started to see that, and I was like, okay, it's time for a little bit of a change here. I need to figure out something so that I can actually give them lessons that I will enjoy giving and they will enjoy receiving, in a way that isn't constantly interrupted by nagging.
And
that's it. You pick your battles, you pick the moments that really matter.
Yeah.
And then you try to just lead a somewhat normal teaching career in between.
You also try to take care of yourself and be normal.
Yeah. And then you try to feed yourself and drink enough water so that you don't pass out during the day.
Oh my gosh. Oh, wow. Well, this has been the best convo ever. This is making me miss our long chats that we would have during training. Oh my God.
And it's good that we can laugh about it.
That's necessary. I remember I had moments, first year especially, where it was just so hard that I couldn't find the laughter, and I found myself missing training, which I still miss training all the time. That year was so difficult, but so amazing. I loved it so much. And I never thought I would miss it. And I remember Jamie and Carol telling us, you're going to miss this year. And we were like, what?
Good one.
I'm like, oh yeah, I miss it terribly. But I wanted to ask you, what's one thing or a few things that you would tell teachers right now that are in your same shoes? Words of wisdom.
Oh man. My words of wisdom would be be forgiving of yourself, but also be able to make fun of yourself and make yourself laugh about everything.
Yeah.
Because we're all in the same boat and we're all struggling at the same things. And as long as we're together and we're making strides in the right direction, it is progress, albeit maybe not as fast moving progress as we would like. We're exactly what you said. We're all doing the best we can. So, lighten up a little, go easier on yourself, go easier on the students, and make time to laugh with each other.
Beautiful. A special thanks to my friend Sarah for coming on this first episode of the teacher series on all things Montessori. Thank you to everybody for listening, and thank you so much for your support. If you're a Patreon member, if you're an Instagram follower, if you are just a fan and a listener, I am so appreciative. Thank you so much. You can always reach out to us by email at allthingsmontessoripod@gmail.com. You can check out our website, follow us on Instagram at allthingsmontessori. We appreciate it all. Thank you all again for being such big supporters of all things Montessori.